The first round shattered the windshield above my head, spraying glass across the dashboard. I didn't brake. I slammed the gas and forced the ambulance forward into the dark. The siren screamed like it already knew we were dead. My hands stayed steady, even as my heart tried to punch through my ribs. Two blacked-out trucks filled my mirror, riding my bumper like predators that had already chosen their kill. The man beside me started shaking, his breathing short and broken. He knew exactly why they were coming. Gunfire ripped through the rear doors, shredding metal and medical gear. The ambulance wasn't armored, and neither was fate. The road narrowed, concrete walls closing in like a kill zone. There was no room left for mistakes. I killed the siren with one motion. Silence fell heavy and deadly. If they thought I was just an ambulance driver, they were wrong, terribly wrong. I downshifted and ripped the wheel, swinging the ambulance sideways through traffic like a weapon. The first truck smashed into the barrier behind us. That's when I knew. This wasn't a chase anymore. This was contact. I took the service exit without hesitation, jerking the wheel hard enough to throw the passenger sideways. Muscle memory guided my hands before my thoughts could catch up. I needed tighter roads, fewer civilians, and terrain I could shape instead of react to. Brake, throttle, steer. Every movement came clean and deliberate, like running a drill burned into my nervous system. Panic wastes seconds, and seconds get people killed. I forced my breathing slow, letting training smother fear. The ambulance rattled like it was coming apart, wounded but still fighting to stay alive. I listened to the engine the way I once listened to men under fire, judging stress by sound alone. It had maybe minutes left if I didn't ease the load. "That wasn't normal driving," he said, his voice cracking as another impact shook the cabin. I didn't look at him when I answered, because eye contact would slow me down. "It's not supposed to be." My eyes never stopped moving, sweeping rooftops, doorways, intersections, anything that could hide a shooter or a vehicle. I mapped the road ahead in fragments, building exits that didn't exist yet. Old habits don't fade. They sharpen under pressure. I hadn't worn the uniform in years, but the Marine never leaves your bones. It just goes quiet, waiting for chaos to wake it up. And now it was wide awake, calm, and hungry for control. They came back harder, faster, angry now that fear wasn't working. I could almost feel their frustration through the noise of their engines. Predators don't retreat, they escalate. That's when I made the decision I swore I'd never make again. I wasn't just surviving this anymore. I was about to turn the situation inside out. I eased off the gas and let the ambulance drift like a wounded animal, listening to the hum of the engine, the rattle of metal, the distant echo of my own heartbeat. Speed is loud, and loud attracts bullets, and bullets find fear before they find flesh. I wanted them close, impatient, thinking I was about to break, thinking they had the advantage. Every shadow, every broken crate, every jagged edge of concrete was a puzzle I could solve with patience, and patience would turn their confidence into mistakes. I hadn't touched that knife in years, but my hand knew it like an old friend, as if it had been waiting for a moment exactly like this. Some habits never die. They only sleep, biding their time until chaos wakes them up. The knife wasn't for decoration. It was a statement, a reminder that I had survived worse than trucks full of armed men chasing me. I flexed my fingers around it, feeling the cold weight, feeling the confidence that comes when preparation and instinct intersect perfectly. "What the hell are you?" he whispered, voice trembling, like he had glimpsed a predator hiding in plain sight. I finally looked at him, holding his gaze just long enough to let him see it. The truth in my eyes that didn't need explanation. I am not a man who loses. I am not a man who hesitates. He didn't know it yet, but he had already put his life in the hands of someone who would not fail. They thought I was slowing because I was scared, because I was old, because I was just a driver. They were wrong. I was choosing the battlefield, selecting every angle, every tight corridor, every choke point where their numbers meant nothing and discipline meant everything. Concrete, shadows, crates, and walls became weapons of geometry and timing, and they had no idea how to fight in a space they couldn't control. I remembered other nights, other hunts, where silence was louder than gunfire and patience meant survival. We didn't chase. We set traps. We watched. We waited. And we struck only when certainty lined up with opportunity. Everything I had learned as a Marine, timing, awareness, control, was waking up inside me again. Every heartbeat, every breath, every twitch of a hand was accounted for. I was a predator again, in a place I made for the hunt. I killed the engine and let silence take over, letting the shadows wrap around us. The trucks would slow too, thinking I was trapped, thinking I had nowhere to go. But in that silence, I could feel everything. Their weight, their speed, their impatience. I wasn't trapped. I was exactly where I wanted to be. And when they realized it, it would be too late. I slowed the ambulance on purpose, letting the two black pickups think they were finally closing in. The passenger's breath was shallow as he pressed a slim metal case to his chest, the kind that didn't hold money, but secrets. He wasn't just running from the cartel. He was carrying an encrypted drive tied to offshore accounts, names, routes, enough to collapse their entire logistics chain. This yard wasn't an escape route. It was a choke point I'd already chosen. I cut hard between containers, forcing the pickups to split their approach. One followed too aggressively. The other hesitated for half a second, and that half second mattered. The passenger whispered that the cartel had already burned 3 safe houses trying to get the drive back. They couldn't afford him alive. I memorized the sound of their engines, their spacing, their impatience. Fear makes people sloppy. Sloppy makes them predictable. I checked mirrors, shadows, angles, every habit drilled into me long before this night. The yard narrowed into lanes barely wider than the ambulance itself. The passenger asked who I really was. I didn't answer. Labels don't stop bullets, but preparation does. This space gave me control without pulling a trigger. The Corps taught me one thing civilians never understand. Dominance doesn't require killing. Timing, balance, positioning, those win fights before they begin. The pickups revved closer. I breathed once. Slow, controlled, ready. I shut off the engine and let the silence stretch. The 2 pickups rolled to a stop, their drivers assuming I'd trapped myself. They thought I was cornered. But I wasn't in a trap. I had built one. Every step they took from here on would be on my terms. I stepped out slow, hands open, body angled. One man rushed me. Wrong move. I shifted, used the container edge, and he lost balance, his weapon clattering across concrete. No punches, no rage, just physics and timing. The passenger watched from behind cover, realizing this wasn't luck. The second man froze when he saw how fast control shifted. No room to flank, no clear shot. I kept my distance, forced him backward with movement alone. Control doesn't need force, it needs certainty. And I had plenty of that. I used medical restraints from the ambulance. Simple, effective, no broken bones, no blood. Just two men who underestimated who they were chasing. The yard went quiet again. Real quiet. He stepped out slowly, still holding the case like it might explode. He asked me why I helped. I told him the truth. Some debts don't expire, and some skills never leave you. As the first sirens echoed in the distance, I got back behind the wheel. The night was ending, but consequences were just beginning. For the cartel, not for us. I drove away knowing one thing for sure. They never knew the driver was Tier 1. I let the morning light filter through the cracks in the containers, illuminating the two men who had underestimated me. They were alive, uninjured, but trapped and powerless. I could see the frustration boiling, the realization that brute force meant nothing here. The passenger finally looked at me without fear, holding the encrypted drive. I gave him a nod. Every step I took had been about control, not chaos, and now the rules had shifted. This wasn't a chase. It was a lesson. I studied the yard one last time, each shadow, each angle, knowing the cartel would remember this night in ways they wouldn't forget. I stepped out again, moving slowly, deliberately, letting every movement communicate dominance. One man tried to reach for his dropped weapon. Wrong decision. A small shift of my body and he stumbled into the container edge. The other froze mid-step, unsure where to go. Discipline, anticipation, and timing. These were my weapons. No shots fired, no blood spilled, just the quiet echo of two men realizing they were outclassed. The passenger whispered a thank you I didn't hear. Focus never lets you hear words until it's safe. He came forward slowly, eyes wide. The adrenaline was fading, replaced with realization. You didn't have to, he said. I shook my head. Some things are bigger than violence. Some skills are for protection, not revenge. He nodded, understanding that the night's survival had been orchestrated entirely, and that without control, none of it would have worked. For the first time, he truly trusted me. I motioned the two men into a corner, hands raised. My calmness was louder than any gunshot. They realized they couldn't act, couldn't escape, couldn't threaten the drive. I could see it in their eyes, the recognition that Tier 1 doesn't escalate without reason. They weren't beaten, they weren't dead, but the lesson had been learned. Respect precision, or get trapped by it. I checked every container, every shadow, every corner. The courtyard was clear. The pickups had been neutralized without a single shot fired. The passenger finally exhaled. I thought they were going to get us. I nodded. They won't, if you trust the driver. My calm was a weapon, just as lethal as any firearm. He survived because I chose the battlefield and set the rules. He clutched the drive like it was the most fragile thing on earth. The sun rose over the warehouses, painting the yard gold. He had survived a night designed to kill him. I didn't need thanks. The lesson was clear. Control, patience, and discipline surpass force every time. The Tier 1 label isn't just for combat. It's for survival. I slid back into the ambulance, closing the doors softly. The pickups were restrained, the passenger alive, the drive secure. Dawn fully broke, bathing the yard in light. I started the engine, the hum filling the quiet morning. They would remember tonight, the lesson embedded without bloodshed. And I drove away knowing one fact. A Tier 1 operator is never what the enemy expects.